Okay. You can see it, right? Can see the screen? Yes? Thumbs up? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks. Okay, so the Montrose Settlements Restoration Program, which is the program that I manage, along with other federal and state trustees, and we've been implementing restoration projects in Southern California for over the last 20 years. And just a little bit of background on the case, on the program. Sort of our focus area here is in Los Angeles and along the Palos Verdes Peninsula. And then, like I've talked about before, we've have quite a few projects that we've implemented on the Northern Channel Islands, Anacapa, and Santa Barbara Island. But today I'm going to focus on our fish habitat restoration work that we've done. But this little diagram I showed the last talk too just talks about a little bit about the history of the problem. So the Montrose Chemical Corporation was a plant that produced DDT. It was located in Torrance, California, and they released the byproducts of DDT through the sewer pipes into the ocean. It operated from the 1940s to the early 1980s. Over those years, it discharged millions of pounds of DDT into the collection system of the LA City Sanitation District. It's actually permitted at the time, you know, to release the waste through the sewer pipes. And then eventually it made its way into the ocean and is sitting in this ocean outfall of Palos Verdes Peninsula. The discharges were taken under control in the early 1970s, mainly because in 1972, the permit to discharge was pulled by the sanitation district. And then later in the 1970s, the use of DDT was banned altogether. And then in 1981, production of DDT was banned. But, you know, we still have this legacy of this contamination here in Southern California with this big deposit sitting off the Palos Verdes Peninsula that has then impacted a large amount of resources and animals in the Southern California area. And you might have heard there recently has been an article in the LA Times about some additional barrels of DDT that were known to the case, but maybe not exactly the extent of them. But the recent studies have found a really large amount of barrels that were dumped off Catalina that contain DDT as well. So there's been kind of a renewed interest by the public in this case and this site because of that new discovery. So just a little bit of biology 101 about contaminations. So the DDT is sitting in the sediments on the ocean floor, and then benthic invertebrates consume the sediment and the DDT, and then it gets into the fish, and then the fish goes up the food chain into sea lions and bald eagles and gulls and peregrine falcons, and as it moves up the food web, it biomagnifies, so it gets stronger in concentration as it moves into these high trophic level species like bald eagles and sea lions. But it has this
Jen,
yeah.
how deep is the DDT?
Oh, it's very deep. Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Do you remember, Patty, how deep it is? Like,
you know, I don't remember, Jen, because it was like it depended on different areas. Remember,
right.
Some of it was some of it's in deeper
right.
areas. Some of it was more shallow. So
some of it's in extremely deep waters, and some of it's in shallow waters. It's kind of like a slope that slopes down.
Because it was that slope, that canyon kind of area. Right. So yeah.
But the barrels that they've discovered, the recent barrels, are very, very deep.
Yeah, the barrels are deep right now, and the canyon part, they got dumped out there. Yeah. And over time, this DDT has degraded and the amount has decreased. There's a lot of debate over how much of that has dissipated, or if it's degraded into a second daughter product of DDT. So there has been recovery. I mean, of species. I mean, the birds, the eagles are breeding again. You know, seabirds are breeding. So, you know, things are improving naturally on their own. So that's the big debate right now, is whether EPA, who has a different part of the settlement, whether they'll actually do any kind of physical cleanup of this site. And they've been trying to decide that for over 20 years. It's a very complicated issue because you can't just dredge it. You can't, you know, and then you resuspend it. So I think in the end, it'll just be left to
to degrade naturally and be covered in sediment over time. So, so there was a lawsuit brought against the Montrose company for the impacts of the natural resources. We have a trustee council that's established, which is set up on these oil spill cases or Superfund sites, and we work together. In this case, it's 3 federal and 3 state agencies that work together to implement projects with the settlement, and we received approximately $40 million from the company for damages to use for restoration. There was more to the settlement than that, but some of the money was used to pay back our expenses during the trial and some past costs. And then, like I said, another part of the settlement went to EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, for potentially doing some sort of remediation at the site. So this is just a picture of some of the council on one of our site visits. We have, each agency has representatives, a primary and alternate representatives, and then we had, at some point, we had some permanent staff that worked on the program, a fish biologist and a bird biologist, an outreach person, and we, the council all works together and votes on decisions related to what kind of projects to fund and implement, and oversees implementation of the projects. And that's actually on San Nicolas Island, where we had a big project removing feral cats from the island. So in addition to the work that we did on birds, eagles, and seabirds, we had a large amount of efforts put into fishing and fish habitat restoration work. We were looking at 2 types of projects. One was restoring lost fishing opportunities for subsistence fishers. So because of the contamination being so widespread in the PV area, there was a do not consume advisory for certain types of fish due to the high levels of DDT and PCBs. So we did a lot of outreach and education to people fishing on the piers to try to educate them on the risks of eating contaminated sea fish that they might catch off the pier. And one species in particular is a species called the white croaker, which is typically found around fishing piers because of the soft bottom that's typically around fishing piers. You get those kind of bottom dwelling fish, and they have extremely high levels of DDT in their bodies. And a lot of people that fish on the piers in Southern California are subsistence fishers. They supplement their family's diet by fishing. And a lot of them don't speak English. They're, they've come from other countries. And the white croaker in particular is a type of fish that they might have seen in some of their other the countries they came from, is a type of fish they'd be familiar with and they would want to eat. So we did a lot of outreach and education, giving them materials in all kinds of different languages, Spanish, Chinese, Tagalong, Cambodian. We had all kinds of languages. And we had fish ID cards, and we put signs on the piers, and we did. We also funded groups to go out and actually interface with the people on the pier, all trying to give them ideas of the types of fish they should be eating, that are safe to eat, and the type of fish they shouldn't be eating, but then also the safest way to eat the fish. Like if you only eat the fillet, it's a lot safer for you, have less contamination. And traditionally, a lot of these cultures, they would eat like the entire fish, or they might make a soup or something like that, and then they really are getting a large dose of that DDT and PCBs. And also, it's high risk to pregnant or nursing mothers as well. So we put a lot of effort into this type of outreach and education work, and we worked together with EPA on a lot of this projects. And we've had a comic book that which is pictured here in multiple languages, which is basically just a story of kids out fishing with their dad, and there's like a friendly seagull that tells them, the safest way to prepare the fish and what type of fish they should be eating. So if you're ever interested in any of that stuff, I have a lot of those materials. If you have any friends that do fish or anything on the piers, this is good information for them to know, because the risk is still there. And we had some fishing derbies with kids, and so we did a lot of different things. And we also were involved in a large wetlands restoration project. This is off the Huntington Beach wetlands, which is one of the last few wetlands left in Southern California. It's actually the wetlands that's just below Bolsa Chica. So it's in Huntington Beach, but it's kind of the lesser known wetland. Bolsa Chica is very popular with people, but Huntington Beach we restored the wetlands primarily for fish habitat in 2008 and 2009, and we funded the restoration of the Brookhorst and Talbot marshes. And altogether, we restored what we call full tidal exchange. So we were able to breach the barriers to the ocean, and that allows the water to come in and out of the wetland in full tidal exchange, which opened up about 100 acres of fish habitat. So traditionally, we had a lot of wetlands in Southern California. The whole coast was basically a series of ocean on one side and then, coastal wetlands, and the openings and closing of those wetlands would just kind of happen naturally through erosion. Now that it's so controlled because we have so few, they usually have to be dredged every winter because the sediment will fill in the outfall. So it's a very engineered habitat, but it's really critically important for fish and also for birds and all kinds of species. So I have a little video, which will hopefully play, of our project. Let's see if we can get to play. It was just playing a minute ago. Oops. Hold on. Sometimes it takes a minute. There we go. And we all look very young in this video. Oops, it was right there. Where's my mouse? Oh, there it is. There we go. Let me know if you can't hear it. Let's hear it. Okay, should be.
Coastal wetlands are some of the most biologically productive systems on the face of the earth. 1 cubic meter of mud flat in a functioning coastal wetland provides more food and energy than any other type of habitat.
Wetlands provide a unique benefit to a broad range of species from birds to fish.
The key aspect that really sold the program on being a part of this project was just the tremendous benefits that this project provides for fish habitat. And the opportunities don't exist very often here in Southern California. Most of the land is developed already, and so this is a great opportunity for us to have really significant benefits.
California has lost over 90% of its wetlands. Most of that is coastal wetland. This was actually the bottom of the historic Santa Ana River, and we're now restoring that the way it was. It'll be the first time in over 100 years that this land has actually seen seawater on it.
We've moved 75,000 cubic yards of material on this project. We've completed 6,000 linear feet of channels, varying width depending on the design.
Without marshes like this one, some of the migrating birds will not have enough food or rest to be able to make it to the next stop and may not even survive their trips.
My favorite part about this project is that we get to work on an environmental restoration, and it's a great opportunity to give back to the community and the people that live in it.
What we're doing today is we're planting salt marsh plants back into the salt marsh that has been cut off from ocean water for almost 100 years. So, get yourself some gloves, get your tool of choice, go for it.
Troop 1134 out of Circle View Elementary, and having a great old time trying to make this community better.
We're planting plants at the new wetlands. That it's home to many, many species of birds and helps them survive. Some of the animals that live there is snowy egrets, great egrets. I don't know if storks live here.
3/4 of the bird species known to occur within Orange County occur within the coastal marshes.
I'm planting pickleweed. Pickleweed, it's edible. The Savannah sparrow lives in the pickleweed. They're endangered and they need our help. We're here to help them.
Pickleweed is a marsh staple. We go out and collect cuttings and seed from local areas, and we come back and plant it and grow the plants and then
the volunteers can come out and do the restoration as well. So they get to follow the whole process all the way through.
These coastal wetlands provide baby fish or juvenile fish protection from predators, warm water which allows them to grow quickly, abundant food supplies, and a connection to the ocean which they ultimately need to move out as adults.
Putting water back into these wetlands, it creates really important nursery habitat for fish species like halibut, which will then grow up in these nurseries and then enter back into the system and be available for fishers to fish and consume, and then also be great habitat for fish in the future.
What this project shows is that nature has an amazing capacity to recover if you give it a chance to do so.
I think as responsible stewards for the earth, we have an obligation to protect our planet. We've got hundreds of endangered species on the list, and we just feel that we have an obligation to protect what little we have left.
That's a little bit about our wetland restoration work. And when you drive down the coast, you know, to Crystal Cove or whatever, you'll see all that marsh right on your left there as before you get into Newport Beach. So then another project that we've been working on for many years with our great partner, the Bay Foundation, involves restoring kelp to the ocean off Palos Verdes. So in a lot of Southern California, we unfortunately have lost most of our kelp habitat due to urchin barrens. So these right here are purple urchins, and here's another barren. So they have just taken over the ocean floor, primarily because of lack of predators. We don't have sea otters any longer in Southern California, and other fish species have declined. So the purple urchins have been able to really just take over and become these wastelands, these barrens. And these urchins are not like valuable urchins. Like a lot of people want to consume urchins, and there's a lot of trade and industry in fishing for harvesting urchins. But these urchins are so nutriently stressed that they're actually of no value to any kind of consumption. So they're just a wasteland, and they prevent the kelp forest from growing. And then with the kelp forest, that's obviously habitat for a whole huge variety of fish species and marine mammals and invertebrates. So we've been working with the Bay Foundation, and they actually developed a project where they go out and they actually smash the urchins with a hammer. So divers dive down and they smash the urchins with hammers, and then really quickly the kelp starts coming back. So it's been hugely successful project. They since in the time that we've done that, we've restored over 56 acres of kelp forest. And they've spent over 8,000 hours underwater, the divers in this project. And there's a quick little video that kind of demonstrates what the before and after looks like from the kelp with the removal of the urchins.
You're looking at life in a kelp forest. Unfortunately, this life is disappearing from our world. Off the coast of Los Angeles, California, bringing our kelp forest back. Fast.
technique that we've developed here in Southern California is now being used as a model throughout the whole, really the whole West Coast, because all the West Coast is dealing with these urchin-bearing issues. So our partners have been advising people in Northern California and Alaska and Oregon on kelp restoration work. So it's really been amazing, and you know, they're just doing a great job, and like that video showing just like really immediate response from the kelp. Although kelp forests are very they're very sensitive to temperature changes in the ocean. So some years we have lots of kelp, and then some years we have less kelp because of the warm water. But you know, we've been able to maintain. The big thing is that they've been able to maintain these urchin barrens. They've been able to keep them out from reestablishing by getting the kelp back, by having the fish back, and they've been able to keep the urchin numbers down. So they are not seeing like recolonization of the cleared areas by urchins. And you can see in the video, like when they're crushing them with the hammer, the fish are like all around them, just like gobbling it up. So they can't wait for the divers to get in the water. So hold on. But then the last project I want to talk about was our most recent project, which we're all very excited about, which is our Palos Verdes reef restoration project. And as you can see on this project, there was a ton of partners involved in this work. We've been trying to build a artificial reef or a rocky reef through this project for probably over 20 years. We've looked at various locations. It's a long story about where we started and where we got to, but we settled on doing the reef offshore of Palos Verdes, and just within that, it was a good 5 years of effort and work to get the permits all approved and the contracting in place to actually implement the project. And then the last big thing that happened was a global pandemic, which we thought didn't anticipate that, and it prevented myself and my colleagues being able to be out on site and actually, you know, be involved in the actual construction. But fortunately, our great partners were able to work within the COVID restrictions and our construction company, and they were able to get the work done, and they were incredibly dedicated and efficient. So it's very exciting that it's completed, and I'm going to walk you through a little bit about it. So this is just one of our schematics that we made for the public to help explain the project. But basically, we are depositing rock that we are taking from a quarry off Catalina Island, and we're targeted an area that was where there was existing rocky reef habitat, but it was covered by sand from a landslide off Palos Verdes Peninsula, primarily by the Trump Golf Course, which overwatered their golf course, and it caused a huge landslide, which put a lot of sediment into the ocean, which then covered the existing reef. So we don't really call this as like an artificial reef, because it's really restoring habitat that was already there. So we're putting the rocks on top of covered rock. Not to get too technical with all this, but just to say that there was a huge amount of research and study that was done to determine where to actually build the rock. And we encountered a lot of strong opinions from the public about this project. A lot of the concern was that we were putting the reef on an area that was contaminated, and that might be, you know, drawing fish to be caught that were in a contaminated area. But this shows you basically, you know, now that we're looking at the shelf site right now, we're seeing a lot of reduction in the amount of DDT in the sediment, which I was talking about before, that has reduced, the level has come down. So we were able to put this in an area where there are clean sediment. So we were not building the reef in contaminated sediment. And there's an extensive amount of monitoring that went on before we deposited the rocks. You know, looking at the habitats, the systems, documenting all the species that were there, just huge amounts of work done to determine where the right spot was and to make sure we had all the proper permits in place. There's a long history of biological assessments of this area that's done through different parts of the Marine Protected Act assessment work and all kinds of other rocky reef studies. So it's a very well-known, very well-studied area. This is what I was talking about before. So over 200 acres of this nearshore kelp forest were lost due to this sedimentation, turbidity, and reef burial. So this is just a picture showing, you know, the sediment plume that was coming out from the landslides. and basically covering this existing rocky reef, which then the kelp would grow on top of from the rocks, out from the covered reef. And like I said, there's an extensive surveys done of this area. So it's a well-documented, well-known area. And they've done, 36 sites around Palos Verdes have been surveyed for over 12 years. And post-construction, the sites will be monitored for an additional 5 years. So like I was mentioning, this is a picture of the rock that came from a quarry off of Catalina. And it's just to give you an idea of the size of the rock. It was massive. In total, we moved over 52,000 tons of quarry rock, and they were deposited in 15 to 20 meters depth of water. So they came on so this is a picture from the water looking at the quarry there. That's basically where our reef came from on Catalina Island. That's the reef actually being quarried. Those are the rocks when they were, extracting them from this quarry. There's Dan. That's during COVID. And there's our reef. And so they were put under this barge. This is just one load of many, many loads of rock that was taken by barge from Catalina out to the site. And we had to do all kinds of permitting. We had to look at the air impacts that the barge would cause. We had to have people on the boats observing for marine mammals to make sure we didn't have any collisions or cause any impacts to marine mammals. We had to do water quality. We had to do air. We had to do all kinds. The permitting was endless to get to this point. And the ironic thing is that the construction of the actual reef took about a week. So it's like, it went really fast and incredibly well. This is a picture from the air showing you the barge as it makes its way out to the site. And here it is, some of the rocks being pushed off by a loader. It looks like they just kind of pushed them off, but it's actually very well, they have a GPS system, and they have all these moorings and systems to make sure that the barge is sitting in the right place, and when they drop their rocks that it goes pretty much exactly where we planned for them to go. Here's some of the first walks going into the water. And this is a cool little drone video that Dan did. There's a little bit of sediment plume in the beginning, but that dissipated pretty quickly. And we did it in the end of the summer, so we timed it for the best weather conditions. You can see it was really calm. We had great weather, great seas, calm seas for the actual construction. And even though I couldn't be out on the boat, I did sneak out to the mainland to see it from the mainland. So if any of you guys remember, I know some of you have hiked out here on these trails with me. That's kind of like right where you come down from the parking lot, and there's that the trails kind of split, and the barge was just right offshore there. So it's pretty cool that you can see how close it was to shore. So I did actually get to see it a little bit. This is just some of the design of the reef. So they were put in these blocks. They were a set of 8 blocks, and each block had 3 modules, and the heights ranged from 1 to 4 meters. And this is like kind of, I don't want to get too technical, but the big thing about the design was that we left a lot of sand channels in between the rocks. So there's so that will help resist any kind of burial, because they'll be able to have transport between the reef modules. But also it allows for this edge habitat, which is really what you want for fish habitat, and lots of nooks and crannies for things like lobsters to get into and invertebrates to grow on. So there's a lot of thought put into how to actually design the different modules, and they're high enough that they won't be covered again, and they're sitting on top of this hard rock, so they won't sink themselves. So we feel really confident that this will last forever. And the divers on the project, they did audits mid-construction to go out and actually make sure the rocks, are basically where we wanted them to be, and that things were looking good. And like when they were coring the rock in Catalina, they had all different kinds of size of rock. So they had a lot of variety and the sizes of the rocks that were deposited. So again, we have that kind of heterogeneity. So there's lots of like variability within the reefs. And this is the Dan's group doing side scan sonar. So this is what it looks like, just to show us, you know, that the reef is there. So they were able to do the sonar pictures and look at the depth and how the rocks fell. And so, like I said, this is 52,728 tons of quarry rock were offloaded into the, and this just shows you, you know, the reef. You can see the little spots where the rocks are there. And that Caillou rock, they call it Caillou rock, was an existing rock that actually didn't get buried. And it's one of the most, has the most diversity and abundance of fish on the whole Palos Verdes Peninsula based on the monitoring. So we wanted to put our reef close to that rock. So we knew we'd have a good source of fish to repopulate. And they also had this halo effect, which is also just talking about having these rocks spaced out. You have more, each reef, it kind of operates independent, each module operates independently. So they're not connected together, and it creates more diversity for the fish. So this is like October. So this is like what, a month or two after we put the rocks were put in place, and we're already seeing kelp growing on the reef. We're already seeing fish. And so, you know, the response has been amazing. It's just incredible to see how much has already returned to the reef and how much life there's already on it in just a short amount of time. You know, lobsters, crabs, starfish. This is the starfish, I think, was in like 3 or 4 days of the rocks being put down. That's some sort of snail, and then fish. Sheephead, I know that guy is a sheephead, and then lots of different all kinds of different fish species already using the rocks, already using the reef. I think that's an opali, maybe. I'm guessing.
No, that's not. No,
Yeah,
that's some little wrasse, kind of wrasse. But I'm not sure which one. Yeah.
And so these are just some cool videos that were shot to show you just the abundance that they're already seeing out here. I got another one too. So you can just already see there's just a lot of fish already. Dan, who's our partner on this, said he's now, you know, this is like more than he sees at marine protected closed areas, or, you know, so, you know, it's just the response is incredible. Or a little bit more of this video. And then these are just some really recent photos that I got today from our partners, showing what it looks like about 3 months later. And we're already seeing it like encrusted by, you know, soft corals and, you know, just looking like it's been there for a while. It's pretty amazing. You know, look at all this growth already on their fish. He said it's teeming with lobsters. You're already seeing, you know, organic, soft corals, lots of different things growing on it. So yeah, it's really exciting. The response has been incredible. You'll like this, Patty. So this now, the city of Palos Verdes, which gave us a lot of trouble from the beginning about this project. They had a lot of concern about the impacts. They want to put a sign out on this trail now to tell people about the project. So they've come around now full circle, where now they love the project, and this is gonna be placed as an outreach sign on the ocean trails to
that's crazy, but I'm glad they're doing that. But that's just like,
Yeah. And we had people, they all thought we were gonna ruin the surfing we were going to cause landslides by dropping the rocks. I mean, yeah, it was wild.
It was crazy. Yeah. But that's funny.
We persevered and yeah, so. Yeah, so just bottom line is the reef was built on time and to the specifications that we planned for it to be. We met all the extensive permitting and monitoring requirements, and it's maturing faster and is much more productive than we even expected. So can't wait to see what happens with it over time. And we already got a lot of graduate students that want to come out and study it, do research. You know, it's a great laboratory opportunity to look at how it recovers and how it responds, and how the fish respond and the invertebrates. So there's going to be a lot of, I think, great work and science that comes out of this. And hopefully this is a way for people to look at, you know, what can be done to restore reef habitat. The artificial reefs have a long history of misinformation, and there was a lot of stuff that was done in the past about putting garbage out and tires and all kinds of things like that. And so there's a lot of fear about that, but I think our project can show that if it's done right, you know, with good planning, good material, you know, you can really bring back habitat that the fish need, you know, to increase their numbers. So yeah, very exciting. And we're just so excited that it's done.
Yeah, but that's great. That's awesome.
And that's all I got, but we can, yeah.
Jen.
I definitely want to be there for the 1-year anniversary celebration. Hopefully,
Yeah.
Jen, sometime.
And I definitely want to. One day I'm going to dive on it when I'm allowed. Yeah, and see it myself.
That was great.
That's incredible work, Jen.
Very good.
Amazing.
Do you have a Mom had a question? Yeah.
I do. How far off the coast did you drop those rocks?
Oh, you're not even gonna ask me that. It's not far. I can get back to you on that exactly, but it's like it's within like 10 miles, I'm sure.
I was just gonna say, I think it was like 9 miles.
Yeah, 9 to 10 miles. It's very, very close. Very close.
And do you expect the coral to come back on that reef?
But it is already. I mean, that's what we're seeing. Just
You expect more in different times.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And probably abalone. Probably get some abalone out there, which is an threatened and endangered species in Southern California. And
wow, that's wonderful.
How do you determine what projects you take? I mean, it seems like there's so much out there. What determines the projects that you decide to do?
Yeah, well, so usually we have some fairly specific injuries. Like when we settle a case, they'll be like, okay, we showed that, like say for Montrose, we focused on bald eagles, peregrine falcons, fishing and fish habitat. So that was like our world. Okay. And then from there, we had an extensive process where we asked the public and to send us ideas for projects. And then we have criteria that we apply and we screen all those projects. I mean, we had hundreds of ideas. And we look at, feasibility of that project, cost, how directly related is it to our target species? And then we come up with our preferred projects. And then we put that out in a document, we call it a restoration plan. And then that goes out to the public and then they can make comments on that.
Well, I was wondering too, like who discovered like there were so many purple urchins out there? I mean, how is that discovered that this is a thing that needs to be taken care of?
Well, that's all the NGOs that we work with, our partners. Oh, okay. Yeah, so I mean, Southern California has tons of scientific groups or agencies, and then also nonprofits that are studying things out there. So they'll say, like when we kind of know who everyone is because we all work with them, and so that's part of my job. All of our jobs is to be aware of what the issues are. So when a spill happens, you can say, hey, well, this spill affected this, and I know that urchins are a problem. We can do something for urchins, and I know who to talk to about that. And then we kind of put it together that way. But yeah, but there are times where the public brings us something that we didn't think about, and we end up thinking, well, that's a good project, and sometimes we change our plan based on that. Like with the Refugio oil spill, which I'm working on now, we just finished the restoration plan. We did the same thing. We had public give us hundreds and hundreds of ideas, and we, whittled them out to what we think is the most meets our criteria the most, and then we propose doing that.
Great.
But, yeah, I mean, we get a lot of, because like there's so many issues, right? And it's hard sometimes to be the ones to say, well, this is what we're going to do. And a lot of people have a lot of things we should be doing other things, than what we're doing. But luckily we can point back to our consent decree for our settlement and say, well, we can only use the money for, these types of things. And we can't use what we get a lot of is like, we should do a lot of research. A lot of people want us to fund research. And we don't do that because we need to see tangible results. I mean, we do monitoring of our projects, but straight up, research, we tend not to do that unless it's something like critical, like if there's some piece of information that we need to know how to move forward on a project, then we could maybe consider that.
Jenny, can you talk about Refugio?
Refugio? Yeah. So Refugio was an oil spill in Santa Barbara. You guys know Refugio Beach and El Capitan Beach is off of Santa Barbara. It was a weird spill that a pipeline burst about 5 years ago, and the oil came across the beach through a culvert under the freeway and across the beach and then into the ocean. And it impacted a lot of like subtidal organisms, which you don't normally see. Like we had a ton of dead animals on the beach, lobsters and trillitrids, these little tiny sandhoppers and all kinds of things like that. In addition to fish and then seabirds, pelicans, primarily brown pelicans. I was up at the spill, Patty and I were at the spill together for about months. I was living in Santa Barbara.
You were there a long time though.
Yeah.
A long time, Jen.
Yeah, it was almost as much as I ended up living in New Orleans and Louisiana for like a year. But yeah, and then we just recently, it was a long saga with the responsible party arguing with them for damages. But we settled not too long ago, and we have about $23 million for restoration. And we just finished our restoration plan, so we're gonna start implementing projects this fall. So
that's good. That's great.
Yeah, we persevered through COVID on that as well. We had our public meeting virtually, which we've never done before. So
wow.
But yeah, so we're pretty excited that we're in the fun part now. We get to actually do projects. We've been writing this restoration plan. We've been editing this restoration plan. It's a long process and a lot of opinions, and trying to write a document jointly together with 10 people is challenging. But yeah, so we'll be doing projects for pelicans. With that case, some work out on Anacapa Island with my friend Annie, taking invasive plants off Anacapa. And
good. That's good.
Yeah, and then looking at one of our other big bird projects is to look at entanglement reduction for birds. So there's a lot of issues with fishing line on piers and pelicans and other species getting caught up in fishing line and getting injured or killed. And then also in fish oils, cleaning stations, when the fishers clean their fish, they deposit all this fish oil, and the pelicans are trying to get straps and they get covered in fish oil. So we're trying to look at a comprehensive way to look at all the issues on the fishing piers. So and there's some fun stuff too, like I've never done before. There's marine mammal work and there's whale work. There's a project for whale disentanglement. So working on how to reduce entanglement to whales, because we had whales and marine mammals injured. So that'll be fun. And then a ton of this type of subtidal work, like for fish. So abalone work and shoreline habitat. There's a big seawall off in Santa Barbara that we want to remove. It's old from the oil. We used to have oil drills, like islands out there, and they pumped the oil in to these pipes, and then they had this big retaining wall on this beach. I couldn't believe it was still there, and so we want to remove that whole wall. But anyway, that's an engineering, very complex thing. because we don't want to cause a huge landslide when we take the wall out. So
Yeah.
but yeah, there's a lot of different projects, so it'll keep me busy.
Do you expect more? Do you think you'll be getting more money with the new administration?
I mean, my program that I work on, we don't work on appropriated funds. I mean, obviously, I need appropriated funds for there are things that keep me going, keep my program going. But our oil spill program mostly runs from settlements, so they won't really affect us that much. But yes, I think it will be much better. And they're they're reversing a lot of the things that were done by the previous administration in terms of rolling back, all these things that Trump, eliminated, as particularly the Migratory Bird Treaty Act.
Yeah. How's that looking, Jen? That was the one
Biden just put a halt on all that Marine Migratory Bird Treaty Act stuff. So Trump wanted to basically eliminate all the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, which would basically let then companies would be able to do whatever they want to birds with no consequence.
Right. Yeah.
So all of that stuff's being rolled back.
That's good.
And I think the big change will be climate. I think, climate is going to be the driver of all of our agencies. So, and that's something we're trying to think about too, is like, how do we, within these programs and these projects, how do we incorporate climate change into that? And how do we put that into like this, was that one of our criteria, when we look at projects, are they climate resistant? A lot of what we do though is like making habitat the way I look at it is like, you need to address climate, but you also need to have habitat for them to survive in. So, it's a way to mitigate for the impacts they're seeing from climate change. But it's going to be great. And I think particularly like Fish and Wildlife Service is excited about, they've been the most gutted, as usual.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so my next 10 years will be Refugio, mostly.
Wow.
Wow.
10 years.
10 years.
10 years, Jen. What?
Well, then I can retire.
You gotta work for real? 10 more years? Is like, what?
Well, what, 65? I mean, 60. I'm only 53.
I know. Go earlier.
You'll be surprised at how fast it goes.
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing Montrose for 20 years. So, I mean,
yep, I was gonna say I did Montrose for over 20 years before I retired. So yeah, it's a long time.
I know. So you can see that when you look back at the videos, and like we look so young.
I know when you had that one picture, even though that wasn't that long ago, it was still. I was like, wow, did I get old?
I know. Dave's hair is all brown. Dave's hair is all gray now. It's really funny.
His hair's all gray now. It's like, oh my god. It's like, oh geez.
What you have to worry about are the children now. The children. What kind of a world are they going to get?
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah, well, that's why, and that's why we're trying to, out education too, educate them about things, as much as we can.
That's important.
Yeah. You need to become a YouTube influencer, Jen.
Yeah.
Jen, that's a great idea.
Well, yeah, I got all these videos up on YouTube, but yeah, we should promote them more.
Yeah. Just need some sponsors, that's all.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, it's pretty cool. And I mean, the fish stuff is neat, and I do like fish too, and I do scuba dive. So
yeah, that is so cool.
Yeah.
To see that kelp regenerate that fast. Oh my gosh, amazing.
Yeah.
Very hopeful for the next few years.
Yeah, that's cool about the kelp work is that they've actually working with some of the urchin divers that can't really work anymore because there isn't really an industry for them. So we've been able to use them to be involved in this restoration work, and so that's got them, involved and excited about that too. So,
which is great.
Yeah, and then I think what the wetlands project was Montrose funding, but then also a lot of it came from Obama's Recovery Act, which was, when he passed that big giant stimulus Recovery Act, which funded a lot of restoration projects. So we might see something like that coming in terms of COVID relief, I think our agency is starting to look at whether there would be something like a Recovery Act that we could then, use for restoration, and, find a way to put people to work, in the industries and in doing construction, but with a restoration, vent. And we were able to do a ton of work with that funding from the Recovery Act when that was, a long time ago, but a lot of stuff got done because of that. So could be exciting if something like that comes around again. And the good thing about this reef project is that there's endless amount more we can build. I mean, we wanted to build more, but we just basically didn't have enough money. So if more funding came, we could just build more of these modules.
That would be great. That would be great.
The way
we on the coast.
Yeah, just keep building from where we are. Just keep building. Yeah. And we've already. I think the way we've written the document, the environmental documents, we could probably just piggyback off of those without having to go through all that we went through. We left ourselves enough flexibility in that. But I mean, there is the startup costs and all the mobilization, which is what's really expensive about that. And so, if we had the money when we were doing it, it would have been more efficient, because you have to, pay for the barge and you have to pay for the fuel and it all. So.
If you want to support these, who would you donate money to?
To support these projects?
Yes.
Bay Foundation, probably.
That was it, the Bay Foundation.
Yeah, the Bay Foundation.
Jen Boyce.
Yeah, not me.
I get X out to Jen Boyce.
I'm a federal employee. Whenever I give talks for Audubon, they always want to give me money, and I'm like, no. But
I already donate to the Bolsa Chica wetlands, but privately, maybe you could steer us in a better direction.
Yeah, I mean, I'm nothing against Bolsa Chica. We did actually provide some funding to Bolsa Chica for their for one of their. They needed funds to open up their
the big channel.
The channel. The problem with Bolsa, and I guess they've solved this, is that they have to keep dredging that. And the reason why we like Huntington Beach is that it's actually a stormwater outfall there. So the city has to keep that open. So there's no ongoing cost. The city has to maintain that channel open. Bolsa doesn't have that, so they have to come up with the money every year. And we contributed what we thought would be enough money for 5 years of dredging, and they used it all in 1 year.
Wow.
Wow.
It's incredibly expensive. And they have to keep reopening that channel, every winter when it fills back in. So, but I haven't heard them asking for money lately, so maybe they figure something out. But I'm not putting my toe back in that water, because I don't want to back.
It's don't even go there.
I mean, we don't have any money. I mean, Montrose has less $300,000 left, so we're really basically done, unless we get this swing money that the EPA is holding on to, which is a whole nother story. But